Today we're here to talk about a fundamental person in the history of Pink Floyd, which became one of the greatest and most important progressive rock bands of all time. The group was formed in 1965, and today we're going to talk about Syd Barrett. Well, Syd, he helped to form Pink Floyd alongside Nick Mason, which became the band's drummer, the keyboardist Richard Wright, and obviously the band's main song. He became the main songwriter later, which was who was Roger Waters, and obviously the bassist and also singer. But well, that was the first lineup of the band. It was that lineup that recorded the band's first album, which was The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, released in 1967. And many people credit that album, and alongside the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which was also released in 1967, as the two albums that started progressive rock as it evolved in the following years. Well, Syd was the band's main songwriter during those first 2 years. He was the one who suggested the band's name. And he was also the guitarist and the singer. Well, they released a few singles, and they released that first album, and they had some minor hits, but sadly, Syd's mental state started to decline, and that is credit to the intense use of psychedelic drugs, but also allied with the possibility of an undiagnosed schizophrenia. So people believe, and his ex-bandmates already said that obviously there was the intense drug use, and most likely an undiagnosed schizophrenia. And we're talking about the early 70s, the medicine nowadays, and all the possibilities of treatments we got now, and the knowledge about that is much different from what you had in the early 70s. So Syd's mental state started to deteriorate, and he couldn't remember words, he couldn't play the guitar, and he couldn't perform with the band properly anymore. So he was starting to really to put the band at risk during the live acts. And thinking about that, the group invited David Gilmour to join them in 1967 as part of a plan to, he would at least play the guitar parts to really be a backup musician to Syd, and he could at least keep the guitar going in case Syd wouldn't be in a good mental state that day. And David was a good friend of Syd, and he knew him for a while already. For a few years, they were good friends, and they had some. Gilmour already shared some really good stories about him over the years. Recall in an interview once, they decided not to pick Syd up one day when they were heading to a concert, and that was the day Syd was fired from the band. They simply didn't want to pick him up. And especially David and Roger, obviously all of them felt sorry about him. And Gilmour and Roger decided to help him out, helping in the recording of his two first solo albums, which were the only ones he recorded after Pink Floyd, which were released in the early 70s. It has some really great tracks. I'm a big fan of those two albums, and they were produced with the help of Roger and Gilmour. But obviously, Syd's mental state really started to deteriorate, and so he couldn't keep the career going. The band didn't remain in touch with him. Obviously, they were focused on touring and recording and writing, so they kind of drifted apart. And in Pink Floyd in 1973 released Dark Side of the Moon, which became not only their best-selling album, but one of the best-selling albums of all time, one of the most famous albums of all time. And they became this huge entity, obviously. And in the following years, they released many other famous records. And 2 years after recording Dark Side of the Moon, the band was at Abbey Road Studios recording Wish You Were Here. And one of the tracks, obviously it's two tracks, right? You got part one and part two, and it occupies almost the entire album. It's Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is a classic song. And when the band was, coincidentally, when the band was recording Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which was a song inspired by Syd, he appeared there. No one invited him. No one called him up. He simply appeared at Abbey Road Studios. And no one recognized him. You know, he was really different. He had gained weight. He had shaved his head, his eyebrows. There are photos from this visit, and no one knew him. At the time, at first sight, it took a while for them to recognize him, and he kind of didn't know what was going on. He asked the band when he should put the guitars on the track, and etc. And that was the last time David, Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright saw him. They never saw Barrett again, ever again. Barrett passed away in 2006 at the age of 60, and that was the last time those three band members saw him. Roger Waters saw him by coincidence a few years later at a grocery store, but he kind of drifted away from Roger when he saw him. And as Richard Wright recalled in an interview we transcribed, you can read the entire interview we transcribed in the article that is in the description. It was an interview the late Pink Floyd keyboardist Richard Wright gave to John Edgerton back in 2001. He explained why the band never talked to Syd anymore after that. Well, the reason was because Barrett's mother told them that it would be better to leave Syd alone. They should leave Syd alone because he still had some recollection of Pink Floyd, and if they went to visit him, or they invited him for a show or something, it could trigger some bad memory and put him on a bad trip. Let's say he could get him depressed and etc. So that's why Syd's family asked them to stay away and really don't try to talk with him. And as Richard said in an interview, they never asked them for financial help, Syd was getting his royalties, and obviously from the albums he was part of the band, and obviously the huge success Pink Floyd had with Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall, especially obviously triggered the fans to go back in the catalog and hear those albums. So they sold much more than they sold back then. So that probably helped to give Syd more royalty checks, and that was the main reason why the band never tried to reach Syd, and Syd never tried to reach them at all later. And it's really one of the most tragic stories in the history of rock and roll music, and it's really sad that Syd didn't have the chance to stay in the band. We can really reflect on this nowadays. What Pink Floyd would be if Syd had stayed in the band. Would Pink Floyd be as big as it became? It would sound different. It would be more proggy or not. It's just life. It's just the way it is, and sadly, Syd was part of the band only for 2 years, and or a little bit more than 2 years actually, but it's just one of those terrible stories in life, and it's part of the Pink Floyd history. And he was and we need to think that without Syd, maybe Pink Floyd wouldn't have existed. It certainly wouldn't call Pink Floyd, because he was the one who gave the band the name, and he was the driving force of the band in the beginning, in those, especially on the first album. He was the one who wrote most of the songs, performed, and he was really the driving force of the band back then. And there are fans who say that the real Pink Floyd was the Pink Floyd with Syd Barrett. So, well, this is the reason why all the Pink Floyd members didn't reach Syd out after the 70s. And I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave your comment, and obviously visit rockandrollgarage.com. Okay? See you next time.